Last night, Donald Trump said something that no American president has ever said before. He said, a whole civilization will die tonight. He said it about Iran, about 90 million people, about the country his military has been bombing for 39 days. He said it publicly on the record to reporters at a White House press conference as his own deadline for bombing Iran's power plants and bridges counted down toward 8 o'clock. And then the deadline came, and the bombs fell. And this morning, the world looks different from how it looked yesterday. U.S. forces struck Kharg Island. Strikes were reported on bridges across Iran. The U.S. Energy Information Administration raised its oil price forecast for all of 2026 and 2027. Gas prices are now projected to peak at $4.30 per gallon this month in America. The EIA warned it will take months, not weeks, for oil flows to return to anything resembling pre-war levels, even after the war ends. Iran's Revolutionary Guard said it would deprive the U.S. and its allies of the region's oil and gas for years if Trump followed through. Iran threatened to strike the Stargate AI Center in Abu Dhabi, the facility being built with OpenAI, Oracle, and NVIDIA. Iran struck a synagogue in Tehran in what appeared to be debris from an intercepted Israeli missile. And in Washington, House Democrats are actively courting Republicans to join a war powers resolution to curb Donald Trump's war authority. Bipartisan opposition to the war is building. The Congress that was silent for 39 days is beginning to find its voice. This is Geo Polity. This is episode 20. The morning after episode, the 120 episodes of this series have been building toward. Welcome back. If you have been with us from episode 1, you have the complete map of how we arrived at this morning. You understand the oil shock and the Strait of Hormuz and the ceasefire deadlines and the downed aircraft and the divided Iranian government and the No Kings protests and all 20 chapters of the most consequential story of 2026. If you are new here, and subscribe now, because what you are about to hear is the beginning of the next chapter of a war that has just entered its most dangerous phase. Let us start with Trump's words. Because a whole civilization will die tonight is a sentence that deserves to be examined with full seriousness. It was said by the President of the United States, the commander of the most powerful military force in human history, in a public White House press conference broadcast live on every major news network in the world, about a country of 90 million people, many of whom have spent 39 days listening to air raid sirens, fleeing bombed neighborhoods, carrying their children through rubble-strewn streets, trying to find food and water and medicine in a city that the U.S. military has hit in every province. Human rights experts responded immediately. Kenneth Roth, the former executive director of Human Rights Watch, said Trump is openly threatening collective punishment, targeting not the Iranian military, but the Iranian people. He said that collective punishment of civilians during armed conflict is a violation of the Fourth Geneva Convention. He said, attacking civilians is a war crime. And he said, making threats with the aim of terrorizing the civilian population may itself be a war crime under international humanitarian law. The International Criminal Court lacks jurisdiction over this conflict because neither the U.S., Israel, nor Iran are ICC member states. There will be no arrest warrant for the words said last night, the way there was for Putin's words about Ukraine. But the absence of legal accountability does not change the moral weight of what was said. A whole civilization will die tonight is not the language of a democracy conducting a limited military operation against a specific threat. It is the language of total war. Let us now talk about what actually happened last night in military terms, because the strikes that accompanied Trump's deadline were significant and consequential. U.S. forces struck Kharg Island, the oil export hub through which 90% of Iranian crude exports pass, with strikes targeting military positions on the island. A U.S. official confirmed the strikes hit military targets rather than the oil facilities themselves. This distinction matters enormously. The oil terminals on Kharg, the infrastructure that, if destroyed, would trigger the $200 oil scenario we described in episodes 7 and 8, were not struck. The military installations were. That distinction is intentional. Trump is maintaining pressure. He is demonstrating capability and will. But he is not yet crossing the line that the global economy most fears, the destruction of Iran's oil export infrastructure itself. That line remains unbroken. For now. Bridges across Iran were struck. The EIA confirmed that energy infrastructure was targeted. Iran's South Pars gas field petrochemical plant was hit by Israeli strikes. And Iran responded. The IRGC said its restraint in targeting regional oil infrastructure would no longer apply. That sentence, its restraint would no longer apply, is the most alarming single statement Iran has made in 40 days of war. It means the deterrence that has kept Gulf oil infrastructure from being destroyed, the implicit understanding that both sides would suffer if the oil facilities burn, is being discarded. The IRGC warned it would deprive the U.S. and its allies of the region's oil and gas for years, not days, not weeks, years. Now, let us talk about what this means for your daily life, because this channel exists to connect the geopolitical to the personal. And today, the connection has never been more direct. The U.S. Energy Information Administration has sharply raised its oil, gasoline, and diesel price forecasts for 2026 and 2027. Gas prices in America are forecast to peak at $4.30 per gallon this month. The EIA warned that full restoration of oil flows will take months, even after the strait reopens. It said, just as we had never before seen the strait close, we have never seen it reopen. What exactly that looks like remains to be seen. In the UK, petrol prices are approaching levels that have not been seen before. Energy bills that were already elevated are being pushed higher by a supply disruption that the EIA is now forecasting will last into late 2026, even in the best case scenario. In South Asia, in Africa, in Latin America, countries that depend on Gulf oil and that have no strategic reserves and no capacity to absorb prolonged price shocks, the food security situation is deteriorating in ways that the UN Food and Agriculture Organization warned about weeks ago and that are now arriving as reality rather than projection. The war that started on February the 28th as an American and Israeli military operation against Iranian nuclear and military infrastructure has become a global economic event of the first order. And last night, with Trump's midnight deadline, with the Kharg Island strikes, with the IRGC's warning that restraint is over, it became something more dangerous than that. Now let us talk about the 45-day ceasefire proposal because it is still on the table. Barely, but still there. Pakistan's Army Chief Field Marshal Asim Munir was in contact all night long with U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance, Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, and Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi. The 45-day ceasefire proposal submitted by Pakistan, Egypt, and Turkey is still alive. Iran rejected the temporary ceasefire but submitted its own 10-clause response, including demands for lifting sanctions, ending regional conflicts, and a protocol for safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz. Iran's response is not a yes, but it is also not a silence. Pakistan's foreign minister said his country was very hopeful for peace talks, but that recent dangerous developments had dealt a serious blow to peace efforts. He claimed the U.S. and Iran were close to sitting at the negotiating table when Israel launched fresh strikes on Iran. Strikes that prompted Iran to retaliate against Saudi energy infrastructure and pulled the diplomatic track back from the edge it had been approaching. There is still a path. It is narrower than it was yesterday. It is narrower than it was last week. But the back channel is still operating. Pakistan is still carrying messages. And both sides have indicated, in their different languages for their different audiences, that they do not want this to go to the absolute worst case. Now let us talk about Congress, because this is a development that has been building for 40 days, and that last night's events have accelerated to a point where it can no longer be contained. House Democrats are actively courting Republicans to join a war powers resolution to curb President Trump's war authority in Iran. Bipartisan support could be crucial given the tight margins in the House. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries and others in House Democratic leadership have called on Republican colleagues to bring the House back into session and vote to end the U.S. war with Iran. A war powers resolution in the House of Representatives, with bipartisan support forming, against a sitting president of the same party who controls both chambers of Congress. This is the constitutional confrontation that we predicted in episode 3 when we told you about Trump defying the Supreme Court over tariffs, the executive branch claiming unlimited war powers, the legislative branch asserting its constitutional authority to authorize and limit military operations, the judiciary unable to adjudicate in real time. Trump's threat to destroy a whole civilization may have been the moment that tipped enough Republican members of Congress members from gas price states, members with military constituents, members who have been receiving angry phone calls for 40 days toward a position that their party's president cannot afford. Not because they oppose the war, but because they cannot explain a whole civilization will die tonight to their constituents and survive the next election. This is what 40 days of accumulated cost looks like when it arrives in the political system simultaneously. The gas prices and the war powers and the NATO threats and the dead soldiers and the downed jets and the profane social media posts and the whole civilization language. All of it landing on the same political system at the same moment. Now, let us connect this morning to all 20 episodes of this series. We told you in episode 1 about the oil shock. The EIA is now forecasting it will last into late 2026. We were right about the duration. We told you in episode 2 about China watching and calculating. Last night, China's position is that the U.S. strikes on civilian infrastructure violate international law. China is positioning itself as the voice of international order against American unilateralism. We were right about that trajectory. We told you in episode 3 about the constitutional crisis. Last night, a bipartisan war powers resolution is forming in Congress. We were right about the collision between executive war power and legislative authority. We told you in episode 4 about Lebanon. More than 1,400 people have now been killed in Lebanon. The Lebanese foreign minister has called on Hezbollah to disarm. We were right about the scope of the human cost. We told you in episode 7 about Kharg Island and the 7 words. It may not stay that way. Last night, U.S. forces struck Kharg Island for the second time. We were right about the escalation trajectory. We told you in episode 18 about Iran's divided government, the IRGC military council running the war against the civilian president's wishes. Last night, the IRGC, not the president, not the foreign minister, issued the warning that restraint is over. We were right about who is actually making the decisions. 20 episodes, one story, 39 days of the most consequential war of 2026. And this morning, as you watch this video, the story has not ended. It has escalated. What happens next is genuinely uncertain, in a way that it was not uncertain yesterday. The 45-day ceasefire is still being discussed. The bipartisan war powers resolution is forming. The EIA has given its forecast. The IRGC has issued its warning. Trump has threatened a whole civilization. Iran has submitted its 10-clause response. In the next 72 hours, one of 3 things happens. A deal emerges from the narrow back channel that is still operating, messy, ambiguous, incomplete, but real enough to stop the shooting. The war escalates to the oil terminals, and the global economic catastrophe scenario becomes reality. Or the political process in Washington, the war powers resolution, the congressional pressure, the gas price rebellion, forces a de-escalation that military and diplomatic channels could not produce. History does not move on rails. The outcome is not predetermined. People make decisions. Those decisions have consequences. And the decisions being made today, in Washington and in Tehran and in Islamabad and in Jerusalem and in Beijing, and in every living room where a voter is calling their senator about gas prices, will determine which of those 3 paths the next 72 hours take. Geo Polity will be here for every one of them. If these 20 episodes have given you something, understanding in place of confusion, connection in place of fragmentation, a map of a crisis that has touched every country on Earth, please like this video right now. Every like keeps this channel alive and finding the people who need it. Subscribe and turn on every notification. Episode 21 will cover whatever comes next, the 45-day ceasefire. The war powers vote, the oil terminal question, the IRGC's next move. You need to be here for it. Share this video today. With everyone who woke up this morning and saw the headline about Trump saying a whole civilization will die tonight and did not know what to make of it, give them this channel. Give them 20 episodes of context. Give them the map that turns overwhelming news into genuine understanding. And comment below. Tell us, do you think there will be a deal in the next 72 hours? Do you think the war powers resolution changes anything? Where in the world are you watching from this morning? And what has 40 days of this war already cost you? We read every single comment. Every word matters. 40 days of war, 20 episodes. And the story is not over. This is Geo Polity. Stay informed, stay analytical, and we will see you in the next one.